In our number 10 spot, we have Ulysses S. Grant. Apparently, Ulysses is known for being a bit of a badass in his time, but also, what you may not know is that he was actually a bit of a scaredy cat. How relatable. Same, Ulysses. Me too. But honestly, no wonder the government kept that a secret, because if the public knew that he dealt with being afraid of a lot of things, it wouldn't have reassured them that they had a strong, fearless leader running their country. Apparently, he had so many fears, including not being able to look at a single drop of blood. I hope he never had to go to war. Poor guy. Honestly, I feel fate when I see blood too, so I feel very understood right now. In our number 9 spot, we have secret affairs. It is no secret that JFK had an affair with Marilyn Monroe, and Bill Clinton allegedly had his affair, but honestly, let's not be so naive as to think that they are the only ones. Apparently, Lyndon Johnson was allegedly known to be quite the ladies' man within the Oval Office, and for decades there have been rumors of presidents that were also in the closet about their sexuality. But still, most of that is, hush hush, probably because of all the press and attention that would arise if such things were revealed, so makes sense. Also, the more people know about you personally, the more you become vulnerable to judgment and possible dislike, and so remaining somewhat of a mystery in order to control how the public sees you is definitely in every president's best interest. In our number 8 spot, we have President John Quincy Adams. Look, if the presidents become old and incapable of working, or if they turn out to be a little mentally unstable, you're probably not going to know about it. Why? Because in the government's eyes, the less you know, the better. The presidents are just one person, and they probably aren't the only ones that make the decisions, and so from the government's perspective, if you're able to be kept out of the loop, then that's just what they're going to do. Perhaps not right, but what can we do? Which is why it is not surprising to find out that President John Quincy Adams, the US's 6th president, had possibly gone a little crazy while he was in office. Apparently, he believed that the world was hollow, and even helped fund a program that would help drill a hole into the ground to try to contact the mole people and begin trading negotiations. Even in the 1800s, this was known to be a hoax, so no wonder they covered this one up. In our number 7 spot, we have George Washington. As great as he was for the American people, apparently one thing that he kinda sucked at was war. Apparently, he was not a good military commander, and when it came to strategy, he lost every major battle that he fought. Apparently, once when he was supposed to capture a French fort, his men accidentally open-fired on a British unit. Oops. His poor commander skills would have probably hindered the public's perception on how he was an exceptional leader, so it was probably best that the public didn't know about this. It makes sense as to why the government protected this secret. He ended up being what some think to be one of the greatest presidents, so that was probably a good decision. In our number 6 spot, we have political clubs. Look, it's no secret that so many presidents and political figures have been tied to clubs and cults and groups, and they have been accused of some pretty unfathomable things. But does that mean every president and political figure is a part of them? Of course not. Regardless, there's no proof, and we can only speculate based on evidence we have, and the evidence is limited. There are pictures, though, of some of the past presidents being a part of specific clubs, such as President Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon on Robben Island, where there was believed to be a cult-like club on that island at the time. But who knows? That's kind of purely speculation. Regardless, we know that the government will continue to protect these specific clubs and their secrets, and nothing will change in that respect anytime soon. Coming up in our number 5 spot, we have President Roosevelt's secret. This one is purely speculation, but would be insane if it was proven to be true. The story of the attack on Pearl Harbor is known around the world because of how horrendous it was. We have all been told the story of the attack being completely unexpected and the country being blindsided. But there is some speculation as to whether that's the whole story or not. Word on the street is that allegedly President Roosevelt actually cut off trade to Japan, and people say that he allegedly told other countries to not trade with Japan, leaving Japan in a state of panic. The attack was supposedly a response to this decision, and therefore it wouldn't be entirely unexpected if it were proven to be true. Now, America was at war, and the Japanese were technically on the opponent's side, so that decision was probably an attempt to get Japan to change positions. But in any case, crazy stuff if it were true. In our number 4 spot, we have TV programs are. Allegedly, the initial reason why TV programs were created was with the purpose to be able to program the masses and control the narrative around the war and what was happening in the world. Experiments such as people being shown a train coming at them and the conclusion of their reaction to run away and think it to be real showed the power of imagery and how it can influence our emotions, how it can create real fear. The government knows this, and the government and presidents use this to their advantage, especially the presidents that have the media on their side. Ever wonder why everyone is super uneasy during election time and filled with fear and chaos, and then all of a sudden when the election is done, it all goes away? Make up whatever opinion you like on this, but it is fascinating to observe, and it is almost laughable that we went about calling TV shows TV programs for so long without even realizing what we were saying, but they knew. In our number 3 spot, we have Thomas Jefferson's stage fright. This isn't so much terrifying as it was seemingly terrifying for Jefferson to experience, but apparently Thomas Jefferson was actually allegedly a horrible public speaker and was terrified of it. People believe that perhaps he just had a stuttering problem, but apparently that is the reason as to why throughout his presidency he only gave 2 speeches in total. Lordy, that is quite a secret. I truly wonder how they kept that one a secret. Well, anyways, regardless, he was known for being brilliant and is known for making great improvements to the American society, but who knows? Maybe if that was common knowledge, the public may have been hard on him for it and he might not have done as good of a job. So maybe it's best that we didn't know. In our number 2 spot, we have restricted areas. Okay, this is another obvious one because obviously the governments of the countries of the world are protecting all of the restricted areas in their countries, including the secret presidential hideaways which we know exist. But in any case, there are restricted areas around the world such as secret bunkers for the presidents, but also a whole town called Mercury in Nevada, Area 51 in Nevada, North Base secret base in Canada, Menwith Hill Royal Air Force Station in the UK that's leased to the US. So many restricted areas around the world with secrets that I'm sure we can't even imagine. The potential things that lie within these secret places is hard to imagine. I bet you there is just so many things that would blow our minds, and I'm not just talking about secret presidential affairs that I'm sure happen. We're talking aliens, obviously. Coming up at our number 1 spot, we have the Presidential Book of Secrets. Allegedly, there is a book of secrets that has been passed down from US president to US president over the years, and it was revealed in the popular movie National Treasure, one of my personal favorites, not gonna lie. This is a book that is allegedly hidden in the library at the White House, and only the librarian knows of its location, in case, something happens to the president. President Obama hinted at this book being real on a talk show interview once. Some speculate that it was complete sarcasm, but on another occasion, he did say that Donald Trump would learn a series of deep secrets when he got into the office, so that's suspicious. Regardless, if it was real, he's not about to reveal that to us because it's a secret. Duh.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Project 1794. This project was created with the goal to build a sort of saucer-type aircraft that would be designed to shoot down Soviet bombers. The program, which was created in the 1950s, was quite ambitious and had some pretty lofty goals. A team of engineers began trying to build a disc-shaped aircraft, but here's the real kicker. They wanted it to be capable of traveling at supersonic speeds at high altitudes. The documents about this project show that they wanted it to be able to travel at Mach 4, which is 4 times the speed of sound, and they wanted it to be able to reach an altitude of over 100,000 feet. At the time, the project was estimated to cost about $3 million, which is about $26 million in today's money. In the end, the project was cancelled in 1961 because the craft failed tests and proved to be aerodynamically unstable, which of course would provide a whole slew of problems at high speeds, especially supersonic ones. In our number 9 spot today, we have Operation Crossroads. This operation is the name for all of the US nuclear bomb tests that took place at the Bikini Atoll in 1946. Following World War II, the threat of nuclear war was at the front of everyone's minds, which led people to want to test their nuclear powers, and the US president at the time, Harry Truman, ordered that the military continue to test nuclear weapons just in case they were needed in the future. Unfortunately, Bikini was the place that was chosen to be the testing site, since all planes and ships traveled on routes that weren't close to the area. This wasn't the most secret mission there's ever been, and the testing that took place on Bikini is now well known, but newly declassified documents shed a lot of light onto how the residents of Bikini were affected by these tests, and it also shows the objections that both scientists and military officials had before the tests were done, and the rationale that was used in the decision making when it came to go against all of those objections. In our number 8 spot today we have Dr. Zhivago. During the Cold War, the CIA began distributing the book Dr. Zhivago throughout the Soviet Union. You might be sitting there thinking that doesn't really sound like an issue of national security, and I thought the exact same thing when I started learning about this secret little project. As it turns out, there was actually a reason behind it. The book was written by the Russian writer Boris Pasternak, and it was banned by the Soviets. It is said that the ban was because the book portrayed an open-minded view of the Bolshevik Revolution, and because the protagonist of the book was individualistic. The CIA saw this as an opportunity to use the book as a tool, as propaganda, so they used some of their allies for help and began delivering copies of the books into the hands of those in the Soviet Union. There isn't a lot of information about what exact effects this had on the Soviet Union, if any, but it does give insight into how the smallest things were done during this time in history, just for one common goal. We often hear about the large missions with technological advancements and tons of money thrown into them, so it makes sense why this small one might often get overlooked. In our number 7 spot today we have Project Iceworm. This secret mission took place in the 1960s, and it was basically intended to build a series of mobile nuclear missile launch sites under the Greenland ice sheet, because this would then house medium-range missiles close enough that they would be able to strike targets within the Soviet Union. This project was called Project Iceworm, but there was another project called Camp Century. Basically, Camp Century was to test out Project Iceworm and see how likely it would be and how feasible it would be. So engineers went to work and created a network of underground tunnels and buildings that included places to stay, a kitchen, a hall for hanging out, there were supply rooms, and even a communication center and a nuclear power plant. This was all kept as a super secret for a long time, and was even kept from the Danish government for 7 years. In 1966, however, the project was cancelled because of the shifting ice. This created unstable conditions for the underground tunnels that are most likely crushed now, but still remain beneath the Arctic. In our number 6 spot today we have Project Grudge. No, this is not about the one I have against my ex-bestie. This project was short-lived and took place in 1949. The objective of this project was to study unidentified flying objects, or UFOs. Basically because of research from before that stated that while some UFOs seemed to be actual aircrafts, there wasn't enough data recorded and facts known about them in order to determine where they had come from. This is actually one project that had a lot of critics surrounding it, and apparently those critics felt like the project was only trying to debunk UFO reports, and I have to ask, even if that was true, why is that a bad thing? I'd like someone to give me a perfectly reasonable explanation for every UFO. I guess the issue really arose because people were feeling like no actual research was being put into the UFOs, and it was more about the objects being evaluated based on the idea that they don't exist, that they all had to be man-made here on Earth, and even beforehand the idea of extraterrestrials were ruled out. In our number 5 spot today we have Operation Gladio. This was a plan that was developed during the Cold War by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. Basically the plan was designed to keep Europe as safe as possible if there were to be a Soviet invasion. Basically the plan was to form these kinds of secret armies in many NATO countries like Italy, Belgium, and France. These armies would be preparing for a potential takeover, and they would then lead the resistance if this were to occur. Some of the preparations for this plan, should it have to go forward, were things like spying, as well as hoarding ammunition, which is a frightening thought. This project was so secret that not only was the Soviet Union obviously kept out of the loop, but some of the highest ranking officials in the countries involved didn't even know about these little secret armies. In our number 4 spot today we have Operation Washtub. This operation came to light in 2014 when documents became declassified and more people could learn about this Cold War era operation. Basically this was a covert mission that had its sights set on Alaska. The plan detailed the training of different people who lived in Alaska. We're talking just ordinary residents. They wanted to train these people to both code and decode and a few other different spying tactics, which would have been so cool. I mean, I would have wanted to be picked so badly. Not that I would have known it was even happening, but you get what I mean. Basically, the plan was put in place in case the Soviet Union was to invade Alaska. Then, these unsuspecting ordinary citizens would use their their newly learned espionage techniques to get all the intel they could and secretly relay the information to high-ranking US officials. As we now know, of course this invasion never occurred, so the contingency plan wasn't needed, but 89 lucky temporary agents were trained just for this purpose. In our number 3 spot today we have Acoustic Kitty. Apparently in 1976 the CIA was spending millions of dollars trying to make cats into spies. I don't know why they chose the one animal that does not care what you want it to do, but alas, they did, and Project Acoustic Kitty was born. The project basically involved implanting electronic spy equipment into real living cats who would then be trained to basically eavesdrop on unsuspecting people. This is another one of those Cold War era plans that was intended to be used on those in the Soviet Union. The project had a whole slew of issues, of course, however, because cats can get hungry and distracted, and unfortunately the first time this plan was being tested, there was a catastrophic outcome. The project was of course cancelled, and the researchers said that they believed they could train cats to move short distances, but that, quote, the environmental and security factors in using this technique in a real foreign situation forces us to conclude that for our intelligence purposes, it would not be practical. In our number 2 spot today we have the Lunik kidnapping. Don't worry, Lunik is not a person and instead is a Soviet lunar satellite that was kidnapped just for one night. This project honestly sounds like it was taken straight from a movie, and it has to do with the Great Space Race. In the early 1960s, the Soviet Union wanted to make it as clear as possible that they were winning the race to space, so they launched a multinational exhibition of their Lunik satellites, which became the first spacecraft to impact the moon's surface, and when the Luna 3 returned, it brought with it the first ever pictures of the moon's far side. It was a big deal, and it's safe to say that the US wanted to know everything they could about it. Of course, the satellite was heavily guarded, but it was traveling from city to city for this exhibition, so undercover CIA agents went to work. Basically, they convinced the man who drove the transport truck to get some rest at a nearby hotel, and basically they would just look after it for him for a while he rested. I'm sure it was a bit more complicated than this, but you get the gist. From here, the agents then took apart and photographed every single component of the thing before putting it all back together, placing it back in the truck for its next tour date. There is no indication that before the operation became declassified that anyone outside of those involved knew what had happened, and I'm not gonna lie, that's a pretty hilarious plan, and the fact that it worked is both shocking and impressive. In our number 1 spot today we have Project Horizon. Even before people were going to space, we had big goals in mind for the world of space travel. In 1959 there were plans for a proposed manned military base that would be located, of course, on the moon. This plan, which was dubbed Project Horizon, would, quote, develop and protect potential United States interest on the moon, as said in now declassified documents. It was estimated at the time to cost about $6 billion, and the projected operational date was December of 1966, which is when they thought that they could have 12 soldiers on the base by. The project not only wanted to study more about the surface of the moon, but what better of a place to spy on the Earth than the moon? This project of course never came to fruition, and the reason it stopped progressing was because the president at the time, Dwight Eisenhower, rejected it at the same time that the responsibility for America's space program was being transferred over to NASA.
Number 10. The FBI files on Bigfoot. Yeah, let's talk about those. Why not? Because they exist, apparently. Bigfoot, also known as Sasquatch, had all of his FBI files released in response to the Freedom of Information Act back in 2019. The files contained correspondence between the FBI and individuals who claim to have evidence or sightings of Bigfoot from the 1970s all the way to the 1990s. The FBI conducted a limited analysis on some of these items submitted, including hair and tissue samples. We got some Bigfoot DNA. He's walking by, scratching, and we found a hair or two. They ultimately concluded that the samples were of no scientific value, but they're still files, which is terrifying. The files also contain internal memos discussing how to respond to calls about Bigfoot, but overall, the FBI's involvement with the creature was sadly quite minimal. I know, I want him to be real too. I really want him to exist. He'd be funny to bump into on the street with that goofy walk. He has a powerful stride, Bigfoot. He has like those, it's all in the quads for him, for sure. Number 9, Full House. During World War II, the United States and Britain, they would secretly create these maps, tiny little maps, these cheat sheets almost, that could help prisoners of war escape from German camps. Now these maps were then printed on thin paper and disguised as regular playing cards. How badass is that? The cards were designed so that they could be peeled apart to then reveal a detailed map of a specific area that would help prisoners navigate safely away. Anywhere else is great. The decks were often given to prisoners by aid organizations or distributed by covert operatives, which I gotta say, what a scary job that would be. That's like some Inglourious Bastards type stress right there. Playing cards, dealing them out to the right people, that is so brave. Oh my gosh. The fear of being caught, I couldn't even imagine. The plan was successful in helping many prisoners escape, and it's considered a remarkable example of resourcefulness and bravery on all ends during a time of war. That's, again, I can't even shuffle cards, let alone do this. Are you kidding me? Number 8, Project Seesaw. In the 1960s, the US military explored the possibility of weaponizing lightning as part of a program called, you guessed it, Project Seesaw. Yeah, weaponizing lightning, like they're Thor, I guess. The goal was to use rockets to inject chemicals into thunderstorms, triggering lightning strikes that could then be directed towards enemy targets with thin wires. Now, it sounds insane. It definitely was. Didn't quite work out. The project was ultimately, thankfully, abandoned due to technical and logistical challenges. Yeah, you can't predict where a lightning strike is going to happen, and the difficulty of accurately targeting them as well. It's not going to work out. We're not Tony Stark. We're not doing the Avengers weaponry stuff. There was also concerns about the potential environmental impact of the program. Can't just send shit into clouds, guys. Despite its failure, Project Seesaw remains an example of how far humans will go in the name of warfare. Weaponized lightning? Listen to yourself. Number 7, Iran military dolphins. Back in the 1990s, Iran reportedly began training dolphins for military purposes, which sounds so crazy it's almost funny in a way. I don't know, it reminds me of sharks with laser beams attached to their foreheads. Sounds made up, it sounds insane. These military dolphins are trained for many tasks, including detecting underwater mines, locating enemy divers, and identifying underwater obstacles. Again, kind of hilarious, kind of terrifying. The use of animals in military ops is sadly not new. With dolphins and sea lions, they've been trained before by various countries for harbor defense. However, the program in Iran has not been independently verified, and there is little information available about its current status. So, sleep in fear, I guess. These dolphins are off the radar. They're actually below the radar. Number 6, Nimitz UFO. Back in 2004, a group of US Navy pilots led by Commander David Fravor encountered a unidentified, it was a UFO, found a UFO in the sky while conducting a training exercise right off the coast of California. This object was dubbed the Tic Tac. Apparently it displayed advanced capabilities that were unlike any known aircraft ever. In 2017, the Pentagon declassified these videos of the encounter and confirmed that it was part of a larger program called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. The incident sparked widespread interest and debate about the possibilities of extraterrestrial life existing and the government's role in investigating them. Yeah, what's going on? I don't know, comment down below. Do you believe in aliens? I kind of do. It'd be weird if you didn't, right? All that space out there, we're the only ones. Number 5, Operation Snowbird. I thought losing my phone was bad. Oh boy, here we go. Back in the 60s, a US Air Force plane carrying lots of nuclear materials, it crashed in the Himalayan mountains near the border between India and China. Just the thing you want. The crash site was difficult to access, obviously, where it crashed, and the US government mounted a secret mission codenamed Operation Snowbird. The mission was to recover the materials, ideally. The mission was hampered by the harsh terrain and altitude sickness among the recovery team. It was almost next to impossible. Although some of the plutonium was recovered, thankfully, a significant amount was left behind and still remains missing to this day. Number 4, Big Brother is watching. Even allies of the United States aren't safe here. Thanks to Edward Snowden, at the end of October 2013, it was leaked that the states were spying on Germany, France, Spain, and even themselves. That's fun. The NSA had tapped into 35 phones. They were spying on 35 world leaders, not just random people. World leaders, that's pretty invasive. One of which was German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who called out the NSA after they found out and said that this act of snooping was just unacceptable between friends. That's a hard quote. That one hits the heart, really. Now, as you hear this, you're thinking, well, hey, Taylor, I'm not a world leader. What's the big deal here? What do I care? Well, it was also reported that the NSA was monitoring phone calls in Spain for the average folk. Apparently, they monitored around 60 million calls in 1 month, randomly, so yeah, world leader or not, better whisper on the phone, better hang up. It's still pretty jarring. Number 3, leaked voters. Back in December 2015, pretty recent, scary, personal information from 191 million voters was all leaked to the public online. Researcher Chris Vickery found this data while conducting a security investigation. Now, Forbes had described Vickery as, dare I say, a good hacker, because they exist. They're called white hat hackers. They find weak spots in security without sabotaging or exploiting them. That's pretty cool. It's like some Tony Stark stuff. That's the Donnie difference right there. They don't ruin the world. 79% of those eligible to vote were the victims here. All their names, addresses, birth dates, phone numbers, and emails, even those stupid emails you had back in the day, you name it. Things you don't want other people finding out was all let to the public. And it was all let out to third parties. We're still unsure who was behind this entire leak. I mean, if you have any hints, comment down below. Tag them, right? CSO Online and databreaches.net suggested that the information here more than likely came from software provider called Nation Builder. But CEO Jim Gilliam announced that that was not the case and that they did not create the database. Although, people lie, so who really knows? He conceded that it is possible that some of the information it contains may have come from the data that they make available for free to campaigns. So a third party took it and then ran with it. That's terrifying. It's almost worse than if he leaked it himself. Number 2, WikiLeaks war logs. Oh, this one was pretty big. I definitely remember this going down. In Stockholm, buried around 100 feet below street level, is an old nuclear bunker. Today, it's a facility owned by Swedish internet provider Bahnhof. Now this is where they keep servers for WikiLeaks. Yeah, pretty important, pretty spooky stuff. Julian Assange, frontrunner of this whole operation, his hard drive is in this bunker. It's stored behind a 2-foot steel door accompanied by numerous backup generators, so it's not going anywhere, and you're definitely not getting in, no way. In October 2010, WikiLeaks actually published Army field reports from earlier, back in 2004. Now, one of the biggest leaks in US history. This report confirmed that there were over 66,000 civilian deaths in the Iraq war logs, out of the 109,000 in total. This leak also suggested that some American troops were classifying civilians as enemies in their statistics, which changes a lot of things, changes a lot of numbers around. Looks not great. These numbers were from 2004 to 2009 alone. It was a big leak. And finally, number 1, hide your money. Putting your money in your mattress sounds a lot safer than, well, how I'm about to finish. Let's do it. Back in 2016, journalists all over the world were looking into the Panama Papers. Basically, it was a plethora of leaked documents, just a loot bag of all things bad. These all came from a law firm, Mossack Fonseca. Now, the operation here was that the firm would help the super rich hide their money in these offshore tax havens. And before you ask, yes, they got caught, and yes, this whole thing was shut down. In total, there were 140 politicians from 50 countries who were all in on it. They were all busted, including the Saudi Arabian Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, and Iceland's former Prime Minister, Sigmundur David Gunnlaugsson. Number 10, Mariner 1. July 22nd, 1962. An Atlas rocket launch was successful at first. NASA's Mariner 1 spacecraft had hoped to be the first to fly by Venus and get ahead of the Soviet Union in this massive space race. Now, after the launch, it didn't take long for operations to quickly go south. The rocket was unable to steer itself and was heading towards a crash rather than the cosmos. Now, there's two things that could happen here. The rocket either lands into the North Atlantic shipping lanes or an inhabited area. Not ideal, so there's no choice other than to self-destruct. $720 million splashed down minutes later. It turns out this was all caused because one programmer left a hyphen out of one equation. That's how long ago it was, where one hyphen just caused all that damage. Classic. Number 9, Phobos 1. 1998. We'll look over to the Soviet Union for this one. We'll go back and forth. Back in 1998, they launched the Phobos 1 spacecraft to study Mars's moons and even land a probe on Phobos, the largest moon of them. Now, on September 2nd, 1998, mission operators lost contact with the spacecraft and they never heard back. Yeah, it just ghosted them and then drifted away in space. That's a bit rude if you ask me. So what went wrong? Where did it go? Well, software uploaded on August 29th. Well, it turns out somebody missed a single character when they uploaded software on August 29th. Again, a single character caused all this chaos. This put the spacecraft in a steering test mode for some reason, which also deactivated the spacecraft's thrusters, so eventually the solar panels couldn't face the sun anymore and it ran out of battery power. And also, communication drifted away forever and then just died. That's so sad. Number 8, the second shortest spacewalk. Luca Parmitano, an Italian astronaut with the European Space Agency, faced what's possibly my new worst fear. Here we go. July 16th, 2013, not that long ago at all. During a spacewalk on the 36th expedition to the ISS, the International Space Station, Luca's helmet began to fill with liquid. Not water, but rather liquid coolant. Water would be bad bad alone, just splashing around in 0G, but liquid coolant, you can't even drink that, know what I mean? I mean, as if you could drink water in the suit, like it's Looney Tunes. Both are bad. The spacewalk continued for over an hour before Luca was back in the ISS and free from his suit of doom. Yeah, he was fine, but this accident could have been a lot worse. The second shortest spacewalk in the station's history. More than fair. Drowning in a weird liquid around your head, I couldn't even imagine. That's my new nightmare. Yep. Number 7, space workout gone wrong. Look, zero gravity, I can't even imagine how hard it is to stay in shape while you're floating on the ISS, just in space. It's funny to watch astronauts work out while they're strapped down to a treadmill, but it's vital for that return trip later on after the space mission is complete. They land back on Earth and they're like, oh yeah, gravity, oops. You know, gotta keep those legs nice and strong. Working out in zero gravity can have its dangers. Back in 1995, astronaut Norman Thagard was working out, getting his lunar leg day in, doing some knee bends, all that good stuff. But while doing so, one of the straps snapped off of his foot and flew upwards, hitting him in the eye. Yeah, gravity or not, that's gonna leave a mark. Thagard then had trouble looking at light from that point on, which when you're in space, that's really not ideal. Just trying to avoid the sun as it's going around you all day long, oh, that's exhausting. Steroid eye drops helped Thagard's eye ultimately, but it could have been a lot worse. Imagine losing an eye in space. Thor lost that eye in space, you know what I mean? Thor. That's pretty badass either way. Number 6, Apollo 1. The first fatal accident in the history of US spaceflight happened on January 27th, 1967. The first manned mission of the Apollo space program. Now, it happened during a simulated launch. A fire broke out in the command module of Apollo 204 at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida, ultimately taking the lives of astronauts Gus Grissom, Edward White, and Roger Caffey. Design flaws in the hatch door made it impossible to open in time to save the astronauts. So it was honestly just terrible situation. Apollo 13 faced issues as well in 1970 when an oxygen tank failed. The crew was supposed to head out to the moon, but they had to obviously return once faced with these impossible tasks. Ron Howard did a movie about it called Apollo 13. Done very well, but again, nothing can compare to the real situation, I bet. God, that's so scary. Anything like, all these sound terrifying, don't get me wrong, but like the fact they're happening in space or in like a really tight enclosed area, I'm sweating talking about it. Number 5, Soyuz 11. It was April 1971 when the Russians launched the world's first space station, Salyut 11. 3 cosmonauts aboard said space station spent 3 weeks observing, conducting experiments, dare I say, normal space station behavior. But their return trip, however, on June 30th, that's when things took a tragic turn. The spacecraft made a normal re-entry and a normal landing, but when the ground team opened up the hatch, all 3 cosmonauts had suffocated. See, what happened was a faulty air vent had opened 30 minutes prior when the descent module separated and the cabin just depressurized just like that. And from that point on, the Soviet and US space programs would now ensure that their astronauts are always wearing their spacesuits during any phase of any mission where depressurization could possibly occur. Just to be safe, yeah, it's terrifying. This is so terrifying. I'm literally sweating doing this list. Couldn't imagine how scary that would be. Number 4, Project 1794. This project was created with the goal to build a sort of saucer-type aircraft that would be designed to shoot down Soviet attacks. Now, the program, which was created in the 1950s, was quite ambitious and had some pretty lofty goals. A team of engineers began trying to build a disc-shaped aircraft, but here's the real kicker. They wanted it to be capable of traveling at supersonic speeds at high altitudes. The documents about this project show that they wanted to be able to travel at Mach 4, which is 4 times the speed of sound, and they wanted it to be able to reach an altitude of over 100,000 feet. At the time, the project was estimated to cost around $3 million, which is around 26 million today. And in the end, of course, the project was canceled in 1961 because the craft failed tests and proved to be aerodynamically unstable, which of course would provide a whole slew of problems going at those high speeds. Yeah, especially supersonic speeds. There goes all of our money and equipment. There we go, just scattered all over the desert. Number 3, too fast. We're at this stage in life where Teslas are driving themselves and they're driving people to work while they're just chilling on their phones. Not for me. I'm a 10 and 2 guy forever. That's hands on the wheel. I'm controlling everything. Because you never know what technology may or may not do, what choice it may or may not make for you. I don't know. On June 4th, 1996, for example, Europe's Ariane 5 rocket launched successfully, but 37 seconds into the flight, the rocket flipped 90 degrees, just out of nowhere. And the onboard computer triggered the self-destruct mechanism just 2 seconds after that point. Yeah, it just made that call for us. Rather than the launch that we heard earlier where a human made that call, this rocket knew it was going too fast and it dipped. The investigation revealed that some sort of old code wasn't properly adapted for the new Ariane 5. Old code for the Ariane 4 was used for the new body on Ariane 5. That equals problems. Now in this case, the engineers had decided that specific velocity in question was too high to become a real problem. That was only true for the Ariane 4, so things did not work. You live and you learn. Number 2, 2001 Genesis. I've personally never been skydiving before because I'm afraid of heights. I don't think I could ever do it. And I'm also so worried about the parachute not opening. I mean, I know that's an obvious, but it's a very real problem, and one that we'll sometimes see in NASA projects, believe it or not. NASA's Genesis spacecraft launched in 2001, but it was 2004 when it faced issues. When the solar wind sample carrying probe was descending back to our home base here on Earth, the parachute never deployed. It just smashed down to Earth. Remaining samples were contaminated by the desert air. Other samples were of course destroyed on this impact. It was a whole mess. NASA's failure report later on in 2009 then revealed that manufacturers had incorrectly installed the probe's accelerometers into an inverted position. So the spacecraft thought it was going up when really it was going down. Yeah, it's a big yikes. Took 5 years to get answers. Nobody parachutes for 5 years. That's the new rule. And finally, number 1, the Challenger disaster. There's an entire series on Netflix about this entire situation. It's hard to watch, but it's way more informative than I can be in, 45 seconds. On January 28th, 1986, barely a minute after the space shuttle Challenger lifted off, a malfunction in the spacecraft's rubber seals that separated its rocket boosters caused a fire. And from that point on, everything happened so fast. The blaze quickly spread up the rocket itself, and the disaster led to the deaths of all the astronauts on board, including the life of a teacher, Krista McAuliffe. With it being -3 degrees Celsius, the engineering team predicted some sort of failure, but NASA had already delayed this project multiple times, so they wanted to press on anyways. The disaster resulted in the temporary suspension of the space shuttle program. More than fair. Again, if you haven't seen the documentary on Netflix, it's really informative. It's sad, obviously, but it's good to know.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Operation Northwoods. This is an operation that comes from the time of the Cold War, and it has to do with the tense relationship that was seen between the United States and Cuba at the time. Operation Northwoods, should it have gone forward, would have been a project that saw violence committed against US and Cuban civilians with the blame placed on the Cuban government. Messed up, right? These acts would include fake attacks of high magnitude, the hijacking of planes, the sinking of boats, like some really serious stuff. Basically, they just wanted to harm themselves just to place the blame on Cuba, and they wanted to do this in order to justify an all-out war with Cuba, but thankfully some people at the time had decided that this likely wasn't the smartest or the best route to take, and the idea was scrapped. For a long time this was hidden from the public until years later documents were revealed that showed this very dark truth. In our number 9 spot today we have Operation Cottage. This operation was a tactical maneuver which completed the Aleutian Islands campaign in World War II, and it was a joint services assault on the island of Kiska. On August 15th, 1943, Allied military forces landed on the island with the aim to eliminate the Imperial Japanese forces that had occupied the island since June 1942. Unbeknownst to the Allied forces, however, the Japanese forces had secretly abandoned the island 2 weeks earlier under the cover of thick fog using submarines and ships. So basically what I'm saying is that when the Allied forces landed here, they were unopposed. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean that no one lost their lives. There were around 313 casualties, which were a result of stray Japanese landmines, vehicle accidents, and a series of friendly fire incidents. Most of the friendly fire incidents were between Canadian and American troops as they mistook each other for Japanese forces as they came from opposite sides of the island. In our number 8 spot today we have rabbit telepathy. This is an experiment that was originally conducted after World War II but wasn't brought to light until many years later, well into the 2000s. Said to have been a part of, quote, Soviet and Czechoslovakian parapsychology research that was done from the end of World War II through to the Cold War era, this is one of the most grisly and truly unbelievable experiments that were conducted. Basically, they were trying to use rabbits to communicate with submarines, which is just already a bizarre kind of concept on a regular level, but of course the way in which they conducted this experiment was wrong and inhumane and truly just very cruel. Just a little heads up, if you're sensitive to animal stuff, I would maybe just skip over this one. I wanna be safe, okay? So for the test, they would take a mother rabbit who had recently just had bunnies. They would keep the mother in a lab on shore, and then they would take the bunnies down with them in the submarine. Slowly, one by one, they would take the life of the bunnies, and each time they did, the mother rabbit's brain would produce a detectable and recordable reaction. Is this one of the worst things I've ever heard? Yes. What's even worse is that the report then goes on to say that other examples of quote animal telepathy research continued into the 1970s, and that it included other animals such as dogs, bears, birds, insects, and fish. I can't imagine they were, but let's just hope that these other tests weren't quite so cruel and inhumane. In our number 7 spot today we have Operation LAC. Operation LAC, which is short for Large Area Coverage, was a Cold War era project that involved the US Army Chemical Corps. Basically, it was a test that was designed to see whether or not it would be possible or feasible to taint a large area by dropping chemical agents from planes. To test this idea, they dropped, quote, a myriad of microscopic particles from planes covering an area that is said to span from the Rockies to the Atlantic, from Canada to the Gulf of Mexico. So yes, definitely a large area indeed. In fact, it was so large that this is actually the largest test that the Chemical Corps had ever undertaken. According to the declassified documents relating to this operation, the tests, quote, did not provide the Corps with nearly as much data as the Corps would like. And then it goes on to say that, quote, to obtain additional data, the Corps planned further tests for the next fiscal year. Okay, well that's a little daunting. While not necessarily the same operation, also in the Cold War era was a similar test conducted that targeted a neighborhood in St. Louis, Missouri. This test saw the area being sprayed with zinc cadmium sulfide. At the time, those local to the area were being told that, quote, the government was testing a smoke screen that could shield St. Louis from aerial observation in case the Russians attacked. But of course, decades later, documents revealed that the tests were actually a part of a biological weapons program. And to make matters even worse, the zinc cadmium sulfide was linked to an increase in cancer among the residents of the neighborhood. In our number 6 spot today we have the embassy missions. This is a secret that was hidden not only from the American people, but also the people that were being spied on and listened to, but it wasn't revealed until 2007 when a document was leaked. This document is one that named 38 different embassies and missions that were so-called targets of US surveillance. The document didn't quite make it clear whether or not these targets were being looked into by only the NSA or if the CIA and FBI were also involved. The document described certain things like bugging fax machines with devices that allowed them to listen in on conversations, and the document also listed the names of different programs that are used within the embassies. The document showed that the embassies targeted weren't just those of countries who seemed to be enemies with the United States, and instead included places like India and Mexico, Greece, and Turkey. It appears as if the goal was to gain insider information into the diplomatic relations between the targets and the United States. The EU embassy in Washington, D.C. was one of the targets on this document, and this leak had the potential to have jeopardized one of the largest attempted free trade agreements in the world, because shortly after this all came out, negotiations were set to begin between the EU and the United States. The French president at the time made his anger about the situation very public and stated that all future negotiations will only be made under the agreement that the United States cease all unauthorized surveillance of any EU buildings or personnel. In our number 5 spot today we have Operation Fast and Furious. No, this isn't another installment of the beloved franchise, although family is everything. This actually was a tactic that was used by the Arizona U.S. Attorney's Office and the Arizona Field Office of the United States Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF, as they were conducting a series of sting operations from 2006 to 2011. Basically, the idea for this operation was to allow licensed firearm dealers to sell weapons to illegal buyers, hoping to track the firearms down later to Mexican drug cartel leaders so that they could then arrest them. So not only did this not lead to the results that they were hoping for, but it actually had terrible outcomes. Many of the firearms that were being tracked have been found at crime scenes on both sides of the United States-Mexico border, and one was even found at the scene where United States Border Patrol agent Brian Terry was killed. In our number 4 spot today we have Operation Starfish Prime. This is an operation that took place in 1962, and it was a joint one between the US Atomic Energy Commission and the Defense Atomic Support Agency. Basically, they detonated a thermonuclear device in the sky above the Pacific Ocean. They launched it from the Johnson Atoll using a Thor rocket, and once months at an altitude of about 240 miles, they set it off, which ended up producing a yield of about 1.4 megatons. The electromagnetic pulse was so powerful and widespread that it disabled not only most of the equipment that was set up to measure it, but it also took out streetlights and caused telephone outages in Hawaii, nearly 900 miles away. The electrons released caused an aura that could be seen over most of the Pacific Ocean, and according to the documents, the quote visible phenomena due to the burst were widespread and quite intense, and apparently it was visible for days. In the end, it is said that the researchers weren't expecting such a powerful blast of electromagnetic pulse, and they were also anticipating that the electrons from the blast would get stuck in the Earth's own magnetic field for months, possibly even years, but alas, they did. This went on to create a radiation belt around the planet that eventually went on to disable at least 6 satellites, which included the world's first commercial satellite, only a few months after it was launched. The government didn't even tell AT&T what had happened until 2005. In our number 3 spot today, we have Acoustic Kitty. Apparently, in 1967, the CIA was spending millions of dollars trying to make cats into spies. I don't know why they chose the one animal that does not care what you want it to do, but they did, and Project Acoustic Kitty was born. The project basically involved implanting electronic spy equipment into real living cats who would then be trained to basically eavesdrop on unsuspecting people. This Cold War era plan was intended to be used on those in the Soviet Union. The project had a whole slew of issues, of course, because cats can get hungry and distracted, and unfortunately the first time this plan was being tested, there was a catastrophic outcome. The project, of course, was cancelled, and the researchers said that they believed they could train cats to move short distances, but that, quote, the environmental and security factors in using this technique in a real foreign situation forces us to conclude that for our intelligence purposes, it would not be practical. In our number 2 spot today, we have the cat drop. Not really sure why the government is obsessed with cats, but here we go. Apparently, the United States Office of Strategic Services, once upon a time, decided that the very best and most sensible way to ensure that bombs that had been dropped reached their intended naval targets was to strap them to cats and then drop them from planes. I know, it's absolutely horrific. Definitely not my plan. They thought up this strange project because for some reason they thought that the cats would just be able to avoid the water and instead direct themselves to the target. Strange in theory, catastrophic in reality. There of course is no way to prevent these animals from fainting midair, and if you were dropped from a plane suddenly with no parachute and a bomb strapped to you, you'd probably also faint, because what in the actual hell? Definitely one for the history books. We can all be thankful that this is not something that carried on for long. In our number 1 spot today, we have Unit 731. The Imperial Japanese Army's Unit 731 conducted some pretty horrifying experiments during World War II that certainly are shocking to anyone who learns about them. The experiments were meant to be done as a way to prepare for biological warfare, but the process was gruesome and extremely inhumane. Different medical schools and universities provided doctors and other research staff to help conduct these experiments, and they used both prisoners and civilians as the guinea pigs for them. There were a bunch of different experiments that were conducted during this time, some of which involved injecting them with pathogens such as plague or cholera or anthrax. Others involved vivisection or operations with no anesthesia, putting them in a pressure chamber to see how much a human can withstand before bursting, or live weapons testing. It is hard to even believe that this is a real thing that happened, and we honestly can't even begin to imagine what those people were forced to face during that time. After World War II, however, the United States gave immunity to Shiro Ishii, who is the Japanese Army medical officer responsible for lethal human experimentation and biological warfare projects. Many of these experiments he conducted just to see what would happen. Why not? American scientists decided that this information would be valuable, so they decided to give him immunity in exchange for the information on chemical and biological warfare. Shiro was never tried for his crimes. Starting off at our number 10 spot, we have the Raven Rock Mountain Complex. The Raven Rock Mountain Complex is a highly secure military installation located in Pennsylvania in the United States, and it is often referred to as the quote underground Pentagon. This facility, also known as Site R, was built during the Cold War as a backup command center for the Pentagon and was designed to ensure continuity of government operations in case of a nuclear attack. The complex is located inside of a mountain and has a vast network of underground tunnels, facilities, and backup power systems to keep the facility running in case of of a disaster, and it is even equipped with communication systems, medical facilities, and living quarters to support personnel in the event of an emergency. Basically, it has everything someone would need in the case of the absolute worst case scenario. Although the site was built for the tense times of the Cold War, it is still in use today, but the functions and capabilities of the site remain classified. We know it serves as a critical facility for the US government and military, and that it has been activated as recently as during the 2020 crisis. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Located in the Cheyenne Mountain Air Force Station near Colorado Springs, Colorado, this complex is a military installation and bunker. It was originally built during the Cold War as a command center for the United States North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD, and as a nuclear bomb shelter for its personnel. The complex consists of multiple tunnels and chambers, including the famous blast doors that weigh 25 tons each and can withstand a nuclear blast. It has its own power plant, water supply, air filtration system, and food storage, which is of course all by design to allow for it to sustain its occupants for an extended period in the case of emergency. It has a strategic location and a huge, impressive design, which is why it is regarded as a symbol of the country's preparedness for national security threats. I mean, the thing is even built with a bunch of springs so that none of the buildings will shift more than an inch during all potential types of disaster. That is wild. Like I mentioned, it was built in the Cold War era, but that doesn't mean it's totally out of use now. The purpose of the complex has evolved over the years, and today it still serves as a vital command center for NORAD and other military agencies, and the complex remains an essential part of the United States military infrastructure. In our number 8 spot today, we have Metro 2. During the time where Stalin was in power, it is said that he instructed that an underground secret transport system would be built known as Metro 2. This mysterious underground system is said to connect different administrative institutions, and it's even rumored that it contains apartments and different technical rooms. It's sort of like a secret escape tunnel for high-level officials. Of course, it's completely blocked off to outsiders or to the general public, and while the Moscow Metro administration denies that these tunnels even exist, there was an urban exploration group back in 1994 that claimed to have found the entrance. At this point in time, the existence of only one of the rumored 4 lines has been confirmed, and it is called D6. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Yamantau Mountain Complex. The Yamantau Mountain Complex is a highly secretive and heavily guarded underground facility located in the Ural Mountains of Russia. Its purpose and functions are shrouded in mystery, and the Russian government has actually never officially acknowledged its existence. It is believed to have been built during the Cold War as a nuclear weapons storage facility and command center. There is an above-ground town called Mezgor, and that town is super secret and off limits, so much so that people aren't even allowed within the vicinity of it, and this is all thought to be because this town might be holding the complex underneath it. The underground complex is said to cover an area over 400 square miles with many tunnels and underground facilities, and its exact purpose and current use remains unknown, with various theories and speculations ranging from a bunker for the Russian government and military leaders to a storage facility for advanced weapons and technology. Some have even speculated that it could be used as a launch site for missiles or a secret laboratory for biological weapons research. Despite many attempts by outsiders to uncover the truth about this complex, the Russian government has remained quite tight-lipped, and they maintain strict security measures around the area. In our number 6 spot today, we have Project Iceworm. This is a little different than most of the others on this list, and that is because this is the name of what was once a top-secret, super classified mission. This secret mission took place in the 1960s, and it was basically intended to build a series of mobile nuclear missile launch sites under the Greenland ice sheet, because this would then house medium-range missiles close enough that they would be able to strike targets within the Soviet Union. This project was called Project Iceworm, but there was another project called Camp Century. Basically, Camp Century was to test out Project Iceworm and see how likely it would be and how feasible it would be. So, engineers went to work and created a network of underground tunnels and buildings that included included a place to stay, a kitchen, a hall for hanging out, there were supply rooms, and even a communication center and a nuclear power plant. This was all kept as a super secret for a long time and was even kept from the Danish government for 7 years. In 1966, however, the project was cancelled because of the shifting ice. This created unstable conditions for the underground tunnels that are most likely crushed now, but still remain beneath the Arctic. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Svalbard Seed Vault. Deep within a mountain that sits in between Norway and the North Pole sits this vault that is more than 320 feet inside. This vault holds a massive collection of seeds. Like, we're talking about 890,000 different preserved seed samples from nearly every country in the world. The vault that holds these seeds is made to withstand both man-made and natural disasters, and the seeds inside are meant to be kept safe, so in case of some sort of huge disaster, the seeds inside would ensure the continuation of a wide variety of very diverse food options. The door to this vault is only opened a few times a year, and just a few people are allowed inside in order to deliver seeds to the shelves. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center. Wow, just like an easy name to remember. The Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center is a top secret facility located in Virginia in the United States, and it was built during the Cold War to house and protect high-level government officials in the event of a national emergency, such as a nuclear attack. The facility is owned and operated by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, and is designed to be self-sufficient for up to several months. It is said that this bunker was even put into action after the assassination of President Kennedy. While the facility is primarily intended for use by government officials, it has also been used to provide emergency shelter for other individuals during natural disasters such as hurricanes or earthquakes. Despite being a highly secure location, the facility's existence and purpose have been the subject of public scrutiny and controversy over the years. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Beijing Underground City. The Beijing Underground City, also known as the Beijing Underground Palace, is a vast network of tunnels and underground spaces located beneath the bustling streets of Beijing in China. Originally constructed in the 1960s as a bomb shelter and military command center during, you guessed it, the Cold War, the Underground City has now been transformed into a subterranean network of shopping malls, restaurants, cinemas, and even a skating rink. Covering an area of more than 85,000 square meters, the Underground City is divided into 3 main levels and is connected to the city's subway stations and shopping centers. The tunnels and spaces are lit by fluorescent lights and are climate controlled to provide a very comfortable environment for visitors. Some of the underground attractions include the Beijing Planning Exhibition Hall and the Underground City Commercial Center. Despite its fascinating history and modern amenities, the Beijing Underground City is still largely unknown to many tourists and visitors to the city, making it a hidden gem waiting to be explored. I guess this is one place that is definitely not so secret or mysterious anymore, and it definitely has changed quite vastly since its initial creation. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Greenbrier Bunker. The Greenbrier Bunker, also known as the Greenbrier Hotel Presidential Emergency Facility, is a former top secret underground bunker located beneath the Greenbrier Resort in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. The bunker was built during the Cold War as a secure location for members of the US Congress to gather in the event of a nuclear attack. The bunker was constructed between 1959 and 1962, and it was kept secret from the public until it was exposed by the Washington Post in 1992. The facility included living quarters, meeting rooms, a power plant, a water treatment facility, and even a broadcast studio to communicate with the outside world. The bunker was maintained until the end of the Cold War in 1992 and was never used for its intended purpose. Today, the bunker is open to the public as a tourist attraction and is managed by the Greenbrier Resort. Visitors can take guided tours of the facility and learn about its history and purpose. What a nice day out with the fam. Here's where we almost had to hide the president. Maybe save the dark history for high school, you know? In our number 1 spot today, we have the Canadian Forces Base North Bay Complex. This complex is a military base located in North Bay, Ontario, which is just north of Toronto. The complex is home to the Canadian Air Defence Sector, which is responsible for the aerospace surveillance and control of Canadian airspace, and it all sits 60 floors underground. CFB North Bay is a critical element of NORAD and the binational Canada-United States Joint Defense Plan. The base monitors and defends Canadian and North American airspace through the use of radar, satellite technology, and other very advanced equipment. Because of its precarious situation in between what was the Soviet Union and the United States, this underground facility was built with safety in mind first. It was designed to withstand an attack 267 times more powerful than the one against Hiroshima. Much information on this site remains quite secret and hidden from the public, but it is said that it remains operational to this day, employing over 1,500 military and civilian personnel.
In our number 10 spot, we have the Demonic Particle Accelerator. It seems that Elon is trying to cast CERN's Large Hadron Collider, aka the Particle Accelerator, in a bad light. Via Twitter, through a meme, Elon called it demonic. What the heck about it could be demonic? This is honestly fascinating, as us, regular folk would just assume that it's just a scientific tool. The tweet read, "Please let me use the CERN Large Hadron Collider. I am normal and I can be trusted with a demonic technology unlike anything the world has ever seen." Does this machine have some kind of darker purpose that perhaps the rest of the world may not be privy to? Do tell, Elon. Do tell. In our number 9 spot, we have the government tax agenda. In a tweet that Elon made on August 11th, 2022, he pointed out perhaps yet another government secret. The US government has been talking about decreasing taxes and making that a focus for Americans. And yes, most recently, on the taxpayer's dollar, the government hired 87,000 new IRS agents, aka the Internal Revenue Service Agency. Is this a dark secret that Elon just brought light to? Is the government saying one thing and doing the other? Possibly. Along with the tweet, Elon said, "Fate," heart emoji, irony. In our number 8 spot, we have the depopulation agenda. In an interview with the Nelk Boys on the Full Send podcast, Elon spoke about how our population is declining even though we're being told otherwise. He said that we've been pushing the movement of the side hustle boss onto all females and males, and so they want to wait to have children. And then some just don't want to have kids at all, and as a result, the population is decreasing. He went on to explain that the way that you can measure if the population is decreasing or not is the ratio of adult depends to diapers. If there's more depends than diapers, then it's because people aren't having a lot of babies. I thought this to be very, very interesting as I sat for a moment and thought about all the people that I know that don't want kids, and also all the people that I know that are in their 30s and don't feel anywhere ready. Perhaps we will see the results of this in years to come. In our number 7 spot, we have the government on Twitter. In a series of many tweets, Elon has been peeling back the layers of Twitter and seemingly trying to expose it as a government orchestrated ruse. From the moment Elon announced that he was going to buy Twitter, people suspected that, he had an agenda, whether it was to implement better free speech policies within the company, or whether to expose that the company is actually being used by people and not just bots that have been programmed to push an agenda. In a most recent tweet, Elon posted an article about a former federal law enforcement and intelligence operations, Dan Woods, who claims that 80% of Twitter users are probably bots. Knowing this information, of course, makes it more likely that the government is using it for their agenda. Honestly though, this one doesn't surprise me if true. How many people do you know that still uses Twitter and actually tweets? I know 0. That to me says a lot. Would love to know your thoughts though in the comment section below. In our number 6 spot, we have Who Are You Trolling? In a tweet from August 1st, Elon shared a meme that stated, "A smart man bases his political beliefs on his thoughts. A wise one changes them depending upon who they are trolling." This is a very interesting message that some think seemingly stems from the same message as George Orwell's book 1984. It's a commentary on the fact that if you feel angry towards anyone in politics, then know that this anger comes from influence in some way and you have been influenced. You will never actually know the truth, only what you're told. This is a darker government secret that people believe that Musk is trying to expose, that perhaps it is wise to not feel any sort of emotion and stay neutral to the stories that you are being told. And if you begin to lean any one way, question your anger, and in the case of this tweet, question your trolling and where it came from. In our number 5 spot, we have no aliens. In the Full Send podcast interview, Elon recently said, if the universe is really 13.8 billion years old, shouldn't there be aliens everywhere? If not, why not? Carl Sagan said there's either a lot of aliens or no aliens, and either one is equally terrifying. If there are no aliens, then what we have here is very rare. Some people believe that perhaps he was revealing here that human beings are unique, and perhaps the government doesn't want us to realize this, as then we would see life as way more of a precious thing. Perhaps if the world did think that humans were unique, then we would see our life as precious and, eat well, take care of ourselves, and try to be happy, and that certainly wouldn't be good for any business that benefits from people getting sick and hating life and the world. In our number 4 spot, we have Area 51. On the Full Send podcast, Elon revealed that Area 51 is not as what people believe it to be. He definitely hinted at the goings-on within the secret place, but he made it seem less supernatural and dark as the internet has made it seem. But then of course some people online think that he would say that because perhaps he's in cahoots with them, and they want to get the world off their trail, and so they have had him speak about it as if it's nothing special. He did reveal that the government and the people of Area 51 have invented weapons that the public haven't heard of and thought of yet. So perhaps, depending on how you interpret that, these weapons could be intended for some dark use, but I mean, the very purpose of a weapon is not positive, so of course. In our number 3 spot, we have government hypocrisy. Recently, you may have heard about the fact that the USA still has many people in jail that were put in there because of heed, minus the H and throw a W in front. Are you with me? Heed. Don't want this video to get dinged. Anyways, there is a lot of people still in jail for this drug, and a lot of people find it crazy that this could be the case, as throughout the country it has now been legalized. But recently the US government traded a Russian war criminal with Russia to free the women's basketball player who was imprisoned there for this very substance. It feels a little hypocritical, I don't know. On Twitter, Elon said this: maybe free some people in jail for heed here too. And then posted this meme of a man not looking too pleased with his hands on his hips, and the meme said, people in the US in jail for heed, while the government trades a Russian war criminal to free a women's basketball player in jail for heed. Is Elon pointing out the hypocrisy in this action and hinting at a weird dark secret agenda that the government might be hiding? Possibly. In our number 2 spot, we have the NPCs. Again, in the Full Send interview with the Nelk Boys, Elon speaks about how everyone in the corporate world are like NPCs. He said, quote, "Are you even real? How do we know that you're not an NPC?" This had the internet in a frenzy as they contemplated, is Elon pointing out the fact that people in the corporate and political world are possibly NPCs? Is this his subtle way of telling everyone? I mean, he has been trying to get viewers to see that a large part of Twitter is just bots, so there's that. Is this a stretch? Could we be living amongst NPCs? In our number 1 spot, we have the Epstein list. Jeffrey Epstein is a former business financier who died in prison by supposedly taking his own life in 2019 while awaiting trial on federal trafficking charges. Jeffrey was known as somewhat of a celeb amongst the Hollywood elite, and he is seen in many pictures with many celebs over many decades. Since his arrest, the public have wondered who out of his Hollywood friends were involved in this scandal, as he obviously didn't do it alone. From Bill Clinton to Prince Andrew, there have been many names that have flown on Jeffrey's private jet to his island where everything was said to have taken place. After the most recent trial with Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey's accomplice, who was also convicted, an apparent list of celebrities that were involved was given to the court but not released to the public. Elon took to Twitter to comment on this. He uploaded a picture of a meme that said, "Things I'll never see in my life," with photos of a dragon, dinosaurs, and a unicorn, and the words, "the Epstein/Maxwell client list." He then went on to say, "Only thing more remarkable than the DOJ, the Department of Justice, not leaking the list is that no one in the media cares. Doesn't that seem odd?" He then added, "Sometimes I think my list of enemies is too short." So, insinuating that he will most likely make more enemies after this tweet. Many people believe that he was insinuating that there are people in the government, the Department of Justice, and the media on the list, and that is what Elon is trying to get the public to see. It would certainly make sense as to why the media is not reporting about it.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Vipholm experiments. This was a series of experiments in Sweden from 1945 to 1955. It's literally going to make you sick to your stomach when you find out what they did. Basically, they force-fed people with mental illness sweets to see if sugar was related to tooth decay. Imagine people just cramming food down your throat against your will. It's very gross. These experiments were conducted by the government and sponsored by the sugar industry. The experiments lasted for about 2 years, and by then the teeth of about 50 of the subjects in the experiment had been completely ruined. In our 9th spot, we had the UK Special Demonstration Squad. This is the name of a group of undercover police officers in the UK. Now, the things that they did are going to shock you. For example, they would steal birth certificates and identities of people that had died at a young age. They'd make sure that they would be around their age and then use their identities. The younger the person died, the better, because that means they didn't already live a life that they would have to cover up. And then they would go around with this new identity. Some cases they actually got into relationships with women, but the whole time they did so just to spy on them. In November of 2015, the Metropolitan Police Force apologized to 7 women tricked into relationships by these officers. Like, imagine that, dating someone you're madly in love with, sometimes even having a kid with them, only for them to be like, oh, sorry, gotta go, was only dating you to get intel on you and your friend circle. It's disgusting, and it's actually happened to multiple women. In our 8th spot, we have the radioactive waste. Apparently, there's a huge radioactive dumping zone located in Tonawanda, New York. In fact, they dumped more than 37 million gallons of radioactive waste from their World War II atomic bomb tests. This area has a high rate of cancer and thyroid conditions, and this is the reason why, and no one's talking about it. In our 7th spot, we have the hepatitis tests. In 1956, the US government began running tests on young individuals living at the Willowbrook State School in Staten Island. This was a state-supported institution for children with intellectual disabilities. And what they did to these students was give them hepatitis in order to track the development of the viral infection. Of course, they were being experimented on without knowledge or consent. To make matters worse, the study lasted 14 years. They also injected them with a number of drugs to see what they would do to their body and the hepatitis. Imagine intentionally making a group of people sick for an experiment. The grossest part is that when the government was exposed for this project, they tried to justify their actions by saying that these people were probably gonna wind up contracting it anyways. In our 6th spot today, we have Operation Popeye. This is another very wild one. Operation Popeye was a highly classified weather modification program during the Vietnam War from 1967 to 1972. You heard me correctly. The government learned how to control the weather. Basically, they wanted to increase rainfall in certain areas to prevent enemies and military supply trucks from being able to travel. In fact, they caused a number of landslides and flooding in that area. Weather manipulation has since been banned from use for military gain. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with HIV. In the 1980s, the HIV epidemic broke out. No one knew how it spread, they just knew that it should be feared, and tons of LGBTQ+ community members were sadly contracting the virus. Well, rumor has it that HIV was a government experiment that was meant to wipe out the undesirables. Of course, the US government has denied this claim, and it's just a conspiracy, we don't know for sure. But based on the other experiments done on minority groups, it's hard to know what to believe. In our 4th spot today, we have Project 112 and Project SHAD, or SHAD. Project 112 and Project SHAD took place from 1962 to 1973 and involved a number of veterans or military personnel. Basically, both tests involved exposing these people to substances they might want to use in warfare. Nearly 6,000 people were exposed to Coxiella burnetii, which is Q fever, Staphylococcal enterotoxin B, which causes food poisoning, and sarin and soman gas. Sarin is a very, very dangerous nerve gas, and soman can cause death in minutes. Both can be fatal if only the tiniest amount gets on the skin. These men had no clue that they were being exposed to this. Moving on to number 3, we have Project Sunshine. This is another very messed up government project. During the 1950s, the US government was using stillborns to conduct radiation tests on. They wanted to determine the effects that radiation would have on humans and how much we could withstand in case of a nuclear fallout. They called this Project Sunshine, and it was anything but rainbows and sunshine. What's sad is that the government was stealing body parts and tissues from morgues without families' consent. It said that more than 1,500 samples were gathered worldwide. This is incredibly sad and sick. Coming in at number 2, we have the syphilis experiments. In 1932, the US Public Health Service created an experiment to see the health effects of untreated syphilis. But the test subjects were told that they were receiving free treatment to cure their syphilis. And that was a lie. Instead of giving the men the recommended penicillin treatment, they gave them placebos, like aspirin. Sadly, 28 men died of syphilis because of these experiments, 100 more passed away from syphilis-related complications, and 40 spouses contracted this disease. And 19 women who gave birth passed on syphilis to their newborn children. In 1997, Bill Clinton apologized to the survivors and their families on behalf of the government. And he admitted that the tests were, and I quote, profoundly and morally wrong. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the radiation tests. In 1953, a number of tests were done on pregnant women to see the effects that radioactive iodine would have on them and their newborns. These studies were terrible. In one study, researchers gave these women doses of iodine 131. Sadly, they all miscarried. When they did, they continued to study the women's aborted embryos. Another study took place after World War II. 829 pregnant mothers in Tennessee were given vitamin drinks. They were informed that these drinks would improve their health and their babies. But it actually contained radioactive iron, and the researchers wanted to see how fast the radioisotopes crossed into the placenta. Several of the young passed away from these experiments. 4 died from cancers as a result of the experiments, and the women experienced rashes, bruises, anemia, hair and tooth loss, and cancer as well. Meanwhile, they just wanted the best for their babies and thought that this drink was going to help them, not kill them.
Kicking off the list at number 10, nuclear site list. Here on Most Amazing, we love lists. I'm not sure if you can tell, but apparently the US government also fancies a list or two. Back when Obama was still running the show, a report was delivered to Congress. Well, it was supposed to be. The 266-page report featured every nook and cranny about the US nuclear program, and it was released publicly on the government printing office's website in draft form by accident. Yeah, just a casual PDF that shows us literal maps to stockpiled fuel used for nuclear warheads back in the day. We love those. The only PDFs I actually enjoy are those ones, actually. Does this stuff happen often? How does this happen? I thought this type of stuff could never happen, right? Well, MIT professor John M. Deutsch said these screw-ups do happen, and it doesn't look like a serious breach. I mean, it certainly sounds serious, but okay, we'll trust the government. Thank you, sir. Let's do it. Number 9, ClimateGate. Yeah, we had a smooth one off the bat, now we're getting right into the serious stuff. Climate stuff. Climate change and stuff. A little different sounding than Watergate, but we'll get to that one later on, obviously. ClimateGate, this was back in 2009 when some hackers released thousands of emails and files, all from the Climate Research Unit in the UK. These documents, okay, hold on to your butts for this one, they show scientists suppressing the publication of research going against global warming. So this sparked a bunch of bad ideas because at that point in 2009, we just believed it. We just stopped listening at all. Climate change critics were like, aha, I knew it. It was all a conspiracy this whole time. The CRU responded and said the emails were out of context and that the planet is indeed heating up, and we're still in fact burning towards our demise. But these docs leaked literally weeks before the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Denmark, so peculiar timing, I'd say. Science fired back pretty quick. Scientists all around the world were actively proving at that point that humans actively are causing global warming. Today we're scrambling a bit more to figure this one out than 2009. Yeah, a few more of you believe this time around. Number 8, God Save the Queen. This one's quite grim, but I have to talk about it. Have you ever wondered what will happen after the Queen passes away? I mean, I know it's the last thing we want to think about right now because dark, obviously, but it's hard not to think of, especially when Politico magazine releases Operation London Bridge to the public. Yeah, what is that? This magazine somehow got documents showing each and every step in detail what'll happen when that fateful day arrives. There'll be phone calls to the Prime Minister, of course, would be first. Customs require that the Prime Minister is informed by the monarch monarch's private security. Flags will fly at half-mast, of course, but oddly enough, in this document, the Queen's death is referred to as D-Day. Yeah, 9 days of protocols will follow afterwards, and after a service at St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle, that's when Queen Elizabeth will be buried with King George VI. It's dark, but I mean, imagine reading about this one morning in 2021. What an odd article. What a brutal way to wake up. Number 7, secret PowerPoint. Nothing sounds less cool than a leaked 41-slide PowerPoint presentation, but I'll do my best. Here we go. When it comes to the NSA, odds are this PowerPoint is going to be pretty juicy, right? This slideshow was often used to train US intelligence, and I gotta say, 41 pages? That's it. I did 45 on medieval knights in high school. That's all I'm saying. Step your game up. This program was called PRISM. You probably heard about this. This is a big deal. And it cost about $20 million a year. This was the highlight of the Snowden leak. PRISM kicked off back in 2007. See, originally they partnered with Microsoft, but once they were attached to Apple come 2012, that's when things got a little dicey, as most things are with Apple. The PowerPoint confirmed that the NSA has access to servers belonging to massive tech giants. Google, Skype, YouTube even, so I don't know, search history, you may want to delete that stuff. There was a summit in California which originally was tense. The United States was accusing China of cyber attack, but right after Edward Snowden leaked the PRISM tea, they didn't have much power at said summit. So China and Europe citizens were obviously not too pleased here. Yeah, leaked data, we don't like hearing about that. This one gets a little worse. Number 6, Big Brother is watching. Even allies of the United States are not safe here, okay? Thanks to Snowden, our boy again, gotta mention him a couple times in this list. At the end of October 2013, it was leaked that the states were spying on Germany, France, and Spain. It's a lot of people, it's a lot of eyes, a lot of spies. The NSA had tapped into 35 phones, not just a couple of dudes. They were spying on 35 world leaders, one of which was German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who called out the NSA after finding out and said this act of snooping was just unacceptable between friends. Ah, brutal. She said the F word too. It's like, hey, we were friends, pal. Don't go through my phone. Don't swipe left in the photos, okay? Betrayal. Well, it was also reported that the NSA was monitoring regular phone calls in Spain for the average folks. So if you thought you were off the hook, you're not, literally and figuratively. They monitored about 60 million calls in 1 month. So yeah, world leader or not, be a little concerned about these guys. Maybe. You know, save some tea for in person. You don't want to give up all that good stuff on the phone. Number 5, leaked voters. Back in December 2015, personal information from 191 million voters was leaked to the public online. Yeah, this feels like yesterday. I remember this all unfolding. I was like, what? How? Researcher Chris Vickery found this data while conducting a security investigation. See, Forbes had described Vickery as, dare I say, a good hacker. They're what's referred to as these white hat hackers. They find weak spots in security without sabotaging or exploiting them, you know? Unlike Snowden or other people. That's the key, that's the Donnie difference. 79% of those eligible to vote were the victims here, so it was a big one. All their names, addresses, birth dates, phone numbers, emails, you name it. Things you don't want other people knowing, let alone third parties, were all out there. If you could vote, you were exposed. We're still unsure who was behind this entire leak. CSO Online and databreaches.net suggest that the information more than likely came from software provider Nation Builder, but CEO Jim Gilliam announced that that was not the case and they did not create the database. Although he conceded that it is possible that some of the information that it contains may have come from the data we make available for free to campaigns. He's like, no, we didn't do it, but maybe we did. It's like, okay. So a third party took what they could and really ran with it. That's terrifying. Time to change your email. Again. Number 4, psychoelectronic weapons. Yeah, this sounds like something Iron Man uses. It doesn't sound too chill now, does it? Psychoelectronic weapons. The first time Curtis Waltman heard of these was by accident, as you could have guessed. He was receiving documents via Yahoo and they were not what he expected. See, originally he had filed a Freedom of Information Act request to Washington State Fusion Center. See, he was trying to find out more on the clashes between Antifa and the far right, but he got a response and it was all about experimental weapons. Guy gets a zip file back in return called EM effects on human body. He's like, Big Shiny Tune 6? He's like, what? I didn't ask for this. Way too many viruses in that one. Big Shiny Tune 7, I think was the good one. That's the good one. In this document, he saw diagrams on these weapons and the effects that they have on people. There's muscle quaking, all body pain. One of the effects allowed users to control their dreams. Is this a weapon? This is pretty remarkable. This was clearly sent by mistake. The only emails I get are student loans, and those ones are not by mistake. Those ones are definitely on purpose. They're like, Mr. Taylor. I'm like, oh God, they found me. Number 3, quantum computer. This next one's pretty eye-opening. Here we go. Computers are getting more and more advanced by the day. Deepfakes are also getting way too good. I've fallen for way too many fake trailers. I thought they were doing a Back to the Future reboot with Tom Holland and Robert Downey Jr. for like 4 days. All fake. Whole thing's fake. But thanks to our man Snowden, the OG secret revealer, it was reported in the Washington Post on January 2nd, 2014, that the NSA is working hard at creating their own computer. Yeah, how fun must that one be? I wonder if it can run Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 without getting hot. No computer can do that. It's called the quantum computer, and it costs about $80 million to create this program. This computer is safely stored in a massive room-sized metal box, not intimidating at all. It's part of a program called Penetrating Hard Targets. So it can break encryptions for just about anything. Finance records, medical, your old MSN, hopefully, maybe, probably, definitely not. What a nightmare that would be. The NSA is well on their way to breaking every form of public encryption. This quantum computer can theoretically break through any RSA encryption, which for the average computer today, that takes years. This supercomputer they're working on can break through a lot faster. We can get through in days, even hours. So you better clear that search history now while you still can. Thanks for the hot tips, Snowden. I was gonna switch to PC gaming, but you know what? I'll wait it out. I'll wait till this new one comes out. It looks a little faster. Number 2, WikiLeaks war logs. Companies have to be somewhere, right? We're in a film studio in Toronto. We go to a certain place. We leave said certain place in a said certain area. Right? Where do places like WikiLeaks live? How do they stay secure? Well, in Stockholm, apparently, buried under 100 feet below street level in an old nuclear bunker. That's where. Right next to Pirate Bay. They're neighbors, actually. They knock on the cement walls. Today, it's a facility owned by Swedish internet provider Bahnhof. Now, this is where they keep servers for WikiLeaks, but Julian Assange, frontrunner of this whole operation, his hard drive is in this bunker, behind a 2-foot steel door, accompanied by numerous backup generators, so he's secure. In October 2010, WikiLeaks actually published Army field reports from 2004 to 2009. Now, it's one of the biggest leaks in US history. This report confirmed that there were over 66,000 civilian deaths in the Iraq war logs out of the 109,000 confirmed in total. That's horrible. This leak also suggested that some American troops were classifying civilians as enemies in their statistics afterwards. These numbers were from 2004 to 2009. One of the biggest leaks in US history, no doubt about it. And finally, number 1, Watergate. Yeah, it's not an internet leak, but it's too good to talk about. This is OG, come on. We have to finish on Watergate. In the middle of 1972, there were 5 men who were all arrested for breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C. Now, it was pretty obvious they intended on bugging the place. They looked like spy kids. They had all the gears. They were, it was fishy. As the year went on, the election came closer and closer, and then all of a sudden, out of the woodwork comes this anonymous source who fed information to Washington Post reporters that apparently the Watergate bugging incident was a massive campaign of political spying and sabotage kicked off by none other than President Nixon himself. Yeah, he was trying to get that re-election. Now, despite this information leak and it being reported in the news and all that good stuff, Nixon was still re-elected, even though he was involved in this entire scandal. These men were clearly linked to a fundraising group for Nixon, but his administration just kept denying any involvement. It wasn't until a year later in 1972 when reporters Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward, they also came forward and exposed more stuff. Yeah, they exposed the administration's role in this entire scandal, and they had an inside source, an FBI agent named Mark Feltz, and this ultimately led to Nixon resigning later in 1974, the first president to do so.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have SIM cards. We see all the time in movies and shows when people are trying to be super secret, they smash their phone and their SIM card, but as it turns out, maybe we should all be smashing our SIM cards, super secret lifestyle or not. In February of 2015, it was reported that Snowden provided documents that showed that the NSA and GCHQ had hacked into a Dutch company that is responsible for manufacturing and supplying 2 billion SIM cards per year, and they supply places like AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and a variety of other providers. While this hack would suggest that the agencies would then now have access to billions of unique encryption keys, which could potentially allow them to bypass wireless providers and monitor both voice and data transmissions of every user that has a SIM card made by this company. The company did reply to the situation and said that they had been the target of at least 2, quote, particularly sophisticated intrusions, and they suggested that they believed that the NSA and the GCHQ were responsible, but the company then denied that the hack was successful in gaining access to those encryption keys.
Number 9, quantum computer. This next one is eye-opening, to say the least. Computers are getting more and more advanced by the day. Deepfakes are going to ruin my life. They're getting really good at those. I feel like an old man every time I see those and fall for it. But thanks to our man Snowden, it was reported in the Washington Post on January 2nd, 2014, that the NSA is working hard at creating their own computer. How fun must that be? It's called the quantum computer, and it cost about $80 million to create. And no, it can't send you back in time. This computer is safely stored in a massive room-sized metal box, which is not intimidating at all, and it's part of a program called Penetrating Hard Targets. I want to make so many jokes, but I won't. So it can break encryptions for just about anything. Finance records, medical, your old MSN, probably. What a nightmare that would be. The NSA is well on their way to breaking every form of public encryption. This quantum computer can theoretically break through any RSA encryption, which for the average computer today, that takes, I don't know, years, but this supercomputer can break through a lot faster. I'm talking days. Just don't go in my MSN, please.
In our number 8 spot today, we have Project Dishfire. It was reported by The Guardian that it had been revealed that the NSA collects 200 million text messages a day from around the world. They then use these messages to pull the details of certain location information, contact networks, and the credit card details of different mobile users. It was also reported that the NSA also provided British intelligence agencies with all of the data, just without the actual context of the text messages. So the NSA has all your secrets and nudies, but at least they didn't share them? I don't know. Basically, they have all of this data and at any point could potentially extract certain information like past travel plans, your financial transactions, your contacts, regardless of whether or not you were being investigated for something. Yes, this sounds illegal, unethical, and a little shady, and this revelation all came before former President Barack Obama gave a speech about proposed policy changes in reaction to the whistleblowing that was going on around Snowden and the NSA.
Number 7. Friends without benefits. Even allies of the United States are not safe here. Thanks to Snowden, at the end of October 2013, it was leaked that the states were spying on Germany, France, and Spain. The NSA had tapped into 35 phones, which, by the way, not just a couple of random dudes, they were spying on 35 world leaders. One of which was German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who called out the NSA after finding out, of course, and said this act of snooping was just unacceptable between friends. Really went personal with the friends comment there. It's like when you show somebody a photo on your phone and they start swiping, like, hi, hello, betrayal, see ya. Now, as you hear this, you're thinking, well, I'm not a world leader, what's the big deal here? Well, it was also reported that the NSA was monitoring phone calls in Spain for the average folk. They monitored about 60 million calls in 1 month, so yeah, world leader or not, be a little concerned about these guys. Maybe.
In our number 6 spot today, we have the Brazil spying scandal. It was reported by The Guardian that Brazil was second only to the United States in terms of the amount of communications that were being subjected to surveillance by the NSA. This means that the NSA were seriously spying on millions of Brazilians, including the emails and phone calls of their president. At the G20 summit that year, which took place in Russia, Brazil's president at the time, Dilma Rousseff, had a one-on-one meeting with Obama in reference to this. He said that he would look into it and get back to her, but before he could, more NSA tea was spilled, and it was revealed that the agency had also targeted Petrobras, which is Brazil's state oil company. This led the president to call this new information industrial espionage, and as a result, she called off her scheduled visit to the White House and demanded answers. The called off visit was important because it was to be the first state visit by a Brazilian president in about 2 decades, and although the Obama administration claimed that it was a joint decision made by both presidents, some media outlets described it as the sternest punishment that had been received at that time in response to all of these NSA leaks. This also led Brazil to take a multitude of steps to hopefully get away from the American-run internet.
Number 5. Backup. When Glenn Greenwald kicked this whole thing off in 2013 with Snowden and his reveals, it was this massive security breach, obviously. Snowden was of course in hot water immediately, but he was ahead of the game from the start. See, Snowden had told Greenwald that if anything crazy happens to him, well, he'll just leak even more information. If Snowden was unable to access these encrypted documents on one of his 4 laptops, then it was set up to automatically send those private documents to higher ups, aka the people directly involved in the leak. On top of that, Snowden reminded The Guardian that he has many more secrets to spill, specifically the NSA's surveillance systems. This is why you make backups. Duly noted, Snowden.
In our number 4 spot today, we have the embassy catastrophe. There was a document from 2007 that was leaked which named 38 different embassies and missions that were so-called targets of US surveillance. This document didn't quite make it clear whether or not these targets were being looked into by only the NSA or if the CIA and FBI were also involved. The document described certain things like bugging fax machines with devices that allowed them to listen in on conversation, and the document also listed the names of of different programs that are used within the embassies. The document showed that the embassies targeted weren't just those of countries who seemed to be enemies with the United States, and instead included places like India and Mexico, Greece, and Turkey. It appears as if the goal was to gain insider information into the diplomatic relations between the targets and the United States. The EU embassy in Washington, D.C. was one of the targets on this document, and this leak had the potential to have jeopardized one of the largest attempted free trade agreements in the world, because shortly after this all came out, negotiations were set to begin between the EU and the United States. The French president at the time made his anger about the situation very public and stated that all future negotiations will only be made under the agreement that the United States cease all unauthorized surveillance of any EU buildings or personnel.
Number 3. China. I mentioned earlier that summit where the United States originally wanted to call out China for cyber attacks, but instead Snowden leaked a PowerPoint training slideshow and the tables were turned just like that. Snowden revealed himself as this massive spy kid on June 12th, and he said he was planning on remaining in Hong Kong until he was kicked out. But in his first press interview since coming out with all this information, he informed South China's Morning Post that the NSA was hacking Chinese and Hong Kong computers since back in 2009. That's a long time ago. It's like when Avatar 1 came out. That's how long ago that was. More specifically, Snowden said that the NSA hacked the Chinese University of Hong Kong, aka the heart of all internet traffic in Hong Kong. Now, of course, this is eye-opening, but there's many who see this hack attack as a good thing. See, citizens want to know what their government's up to, and honestly, I myself would love to know if the NSA was rummaging through my chats. So a poll was conducted on June 10th and 11, and apparently 44% of Americans were on board with Snowden's outing. They were with him, and 42% of Americans say that he's a bad boy. 57% were not a fan of the NSA's action, while 37% were on board. 30% of folks liked the fact that they were being spied on. That's some weird kind of kink, I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you want the NSA in your Dropbox? Let us know in the comments your thoughts below. We'd love to hear from you.
In our number 2 spot today, we have caller information. In 2013, it was reported by The Guardian that, according to the documents that were leaked by Snowden, the Obama administration has allowed the NSA to collect different caller information from Verizon. This was done through what was called a quote business records provision of the Patriot Act that was established under the presidency of George W. Bush. It allowed the government to order Verizon to hand over caller information every single day. The information included things like the time, location, and duration of the call. The information began being collected under the Bush administration in 2001, and they were collected from AT&T, Verizon, and Bell South. Of course, once these documents were leaked and the information became public knowledge, US officials began trying to reassure the public that this surveillance was somehow necessary and was actually a program vital to national security, but many people rightfully felt like the spying was an unnecessary invasion of their privacy. This one is tricky because there certainly is a fine line with these things.
And finally, number 1. PowerPoint. Nothing sounds less cool than a leaked 41-slide PowerPoint presentation, but when it comes to the NSA, odds are it's going to be a little juicy. This slideshow is used to train US intelligence, and I gotta say, 41 pages? That's it? I did 45 on medieval knights in high school. Step your game up. This program called Prism cost about $20 million a year, and it was the highlight of this leak. Prism kicked off back in 2007. Originally, they partnered with Microsoft, but once they were attached to Apple, come 2012, well, that's when things got a little bit fishy, as most things are with Apple, specifically their maps. That was horrible. The PowerPoint confirmed that the NSA has access to servers belonging to massive tech giants like Google, Skype, or even YouTube. Yeah, right here, they're listening right now. So your search history, emails, anything that rolls through those, usernames, passwords, well, they've got them. Even Skaterboy69 at Hotmail, odds are, they're already looking. You're done. You're canceled, Brad. There was a summit in California which originally was tense. The United States were accusing China of cyber attacks, but right after Edward leaked this Prism T, they didn't have much power at that summit. China and Europe's citizens weren't too pleased here, and honestly, yeah, it's a botched meeting. I can understand why.